Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Western Continuum Coordinated Entry Training. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is going to be kind of a joint training between myself and Javon Clark at LCAP. We're going to be talking about the referrals and a lot about the actual prioritization list process and within the HMIS system. So, Javon, are you there?
I'm here.
All right. Do you want to give an intro or?
Yes. Hi, everyone. How are you? So I wanted to start by following up with a few of the questions that we had yesterday in regards to the ACT and ACT score that's on the assessment, and we did schedule a meeting for next week to review the scoring of that question, and then so you'll see changes probably in the next few weeks regarding that scoring. And then with the, is there another question that I said I would follow up on? Diversion, I wanted to hear more, and I believe I gave a definition of what diversion is, but as far as the plan goes, we would like to see for like the diversion activities to occur prior to a shelter bed being offered, and it would make sense for the assessment center staff to be that appropriate person who would administer the diversion strategy. So those were the only two follow-ups that I had before we got into the training. But yeah, I hope that this next training with the referrals and the housing prioritization makes sense to everyone, and if you have any additional questions, feel free to ask so we can continue to build out the system. All right, that's all I have, Brian.
Cool, thank you. During the training, we do have a large amount of people, so we do have everybody muted to keep the background noise down, but we do have a chat box, so go ahead and enter in the chat. I will monitor during the training, try to get to them. If the question's kind of right what we're dealing with, I try to stop and answer, but usually it'll be at a break point when we're changing sections. Then at the end, we always go and answer the rest of the questions that we haven't gotten to at that time. What I'm going to go ahead and do is go into the system, and it's going to be very demo heavy, kind of showing the prioritization list management. Javon's going to be unmuted during the whole time, so please, this is not only kind of HMIS based training, this is a lot of process rules that are being put in place for, when you should do things, so please feel free to interrupt me and, clarify things or send me in other directions if you feel it would be beneficial to the group. Quick introduction for the few people that might not have been here yesterday. It is a web-based software, username and password. Pretty much anywhere you have a computer and internet, you can get into the system. Two main things that you want to look out for when you're logging in and when you're using the system are the work group and the organization. It's very important. The organization, most of you are attached to a single organization, so it's not going to really matter. You're going to default to a single one. For those that do have multiple ones, you want to make sure you're in the organization for the data that you're going to be working on, or if you have a specific organization that you work only with coordinated entry with, you want to make sure you're on that. For the work group itself, these are more like roles in the system. They kind of determine what kind of functions and features and buttons and options you have when you log in. So because coordinated entry is so unique, we've actually created two coordinated Western Continuum coordinated entry work groups or roles within the system, and assigned to everybody that has access to the system. So you want to make sure that you log into one of them, and we have a regular version for non-DV providers and then a DV version for our DV providers. Now, as far as what we're going to show here for the prioritization list and referral stuff, both of the work groups are the same. They're more differentiated for the intake part that we talked about yesterday. But you definitely want to make sure you're in the coordinated work group when you log in or when you're using the system to get these options. Now, another option, one thing I want to talk about is over here on the top right-hand side near your help and sign out button, there's your name. And it's underlined, where you can hover over it and it'll give you what your current agency is as well as your work group. If you click that link, it'll also bring you up this secondary screen, which looks a lot like those options when you logged in, and that it actually allows you to switch work groups or even organizations on the fly in the system. So that's really helpful if you log in under your regular HMIS programs and you're like, oh, I don't see my options. Oh, you don't have to log out, log back in. You can just use this option, switch over to coordinated entry, and the screen will refresh, and you'll be good to go. Navigation. System's broken up. We got menus on the left-hand side, and they're kind of like the internet hover menus. These are actions related to whatever tab or workspace you're on. Within the coordinated entry ones, there's basically three main tabs or sections, and they're kind of divided by, the kind of actions that you do on them. By default, you're always brought to the client tab, and that's where you're going to do most of your client data and entry, and that's where yesterday's intake and assessment training took place. There's also a home data or home tab, and that is mostly reporting. At least for coordinated entry. It also has other things like system documents and case management features. Could also be known as a user tab. The other tab, which is where we're going to spend a lot of our time in, is the providers tab. This is kind of the tab where a lot of collaborative functions are for coordinated entry, such as the wait list, the community, the prioritization list, referrals, those sort of things. So definitely want to make sure that you're in the providers tab, and that is where the actual prioritization list is going to be. So we are actually going to start there. And I'm going to give you a brief overview of the list itself, the kind of fields that are on it. Should be familiar for those that were here yesterday, because when you went through the last step of the intake, which was the placement, when you actually place them on the list, the fields are important. The selections for things like service needs and counties and other settings, basically, because they transcribe over here to the list so that everybody can view them and use them to try to match up with clients. Once you get onto the Providers tab, basically you have a menu here, and most of the time you're going to see folders here. You've got your Provider Management, you've got Provider Reports, and then you have a Western Prioritization List. You want to click on that folder because that's just the folder. It's not actually the list itself. And when it opens up, you're going to have three options underneath. The bottom two, those are reports, which hopefully we'll get to and be able to show you, especially the details report. But the actual prioritization list is this option right here. Now, before we go into this, up at the top, you do want to make sure that when you load the Provider tab, that the name of your provider is listed at the top of the screen. And now, provider, I know it means It's kind of synonymous with a lot of things in the real world, you know, organization, agency. In Client Track, provider is just another name for organization. So it's a one-to-one. It's just going to be your organization's name that you're logged into the system as. Now, for some like first-time users that go into this tab, like for the first time, their agency or provider up here may be blank. And if it is blank, then this menu is probably not going to be shown. So what you want to make sure is you can go to Access Provider, and then Access Provider will always show you your provider within your agency. Now, I have two just because I was testing around and playing around. I don't believe any organization in the system has more than one. So you're going to pick your single provider, and then it's going to load up here. And that's kind of a one-time deal. Once you've loaded it the first time, you'll never have to load it again. But it does catch some people, especially when they go into it for the first time. So I wanted to mention it to make sure that it does exist up there. Okay, now that we've got a provider, we are ready to go into the list. And basically, you just click on it, and it will load the prioritization list. And it shows each client or each, wait list record is listed in a row. That's a single placement, basically one per screening assessment, kind of you done on the intake. And as you can see here, it shows a bunch of information about when they were added, their ID. It shows information about the makeup of the household. This is where the counties show up. That's why the counties are important. It also shows their latest screening type and score, a list of their subpopulations, which we'll talk about a little bit, their service needs, which are very important, as well as their status, days in current status, and the last intake notes. So these are all very good summary information to provide information about the record itself. Now, by default, when you load it, it loads with the highest screening score at the top. So it's basically it automatically prioritizes the list based on the highest score. So that's why you're going to see the highest scores at the top. Now, we have all these options here, as you can see, allow you to filter the list. Because right here, as we can see, it'll actually show you the number of results found. This is a training site. There's only 32. In the production site, there are many, many, many more. So filtering is necessary to try to wean down that list to find potential matches or clients that you might want to look at to provide services to. And we'll get into that a little bit about why we're doing that stuff in a little bit. The options here are basically tied to the fields down below. We've got a list type. Basically, we just have two types. We got the homeless clients, which are anybody that are non-DV, and those that are DV. So it basically helps the DV providers split out their assessed clients. You can search by service list, service need. You can county. Then there is subpopulation, and we actually allow you to pick multiple combinations of subpopulations, as we'll show you, to try to find matches. And then we've got a type, and there's basically three types. By default, you load the active type, which basically means they're current active people on the list that are looking for services. The historical list basically means the client's been closed out. They're no longer looking for, they've either been placed or they've been closed out for whatever reason. They're no longer active, no longer looking for services. So it's kind of a history tab, almost like enrollments, they're exited. And then there is actually a new missing type, which we've just recently added, and that's kind of a subcategory, which we'll explain a little more, is for those that are on the list but have kind of disappeared, like there hasn't been contact, within X amount of time. You don't want to place them on the historical list, but you don't want to keep them on the active list. So you can move them to this missing list, and it allows for, different efforts, specifically, I believe, street outreach and outreach type operations to occur for those on those lists. So it'll automatically filter there. And then you can also always search by the client's name. So that's a nice, easy way to do it. And just to let you know, it is kind of weird with the name. You do have to put last name, comma, first name. It's kind of the name field that you do in there. So make sure about the format with that. So just kind of, show you how the list may work, and it actually works automatically. It filters dynamically based on what you select. So if you say, hey, I want to look at rapid rehousing within Lawrence County that are veterans and chronically homeless. Actually, there's no clients come up there. So let's say anybody that's just a veteran. And as you can see here, it shows one person. And you can also see this person has veteran, mental health. So if we were to filter by mental health issues or physical issues, because we also have substance abuse, domestic violence, chronically homeless, youth, and veteran, it will filter and only return selections that have at least those matches. So that's a nice way to try to find certain subpopulations that maybe your program may either prioritize or you might be searching for on the list itself. So the search lets you do a number of things to find the clients that you're looking for. Okay. Oh, I'm just going to reset it. As I said, it all does that in real time, so there's no search button you have to do it. It automatically populates as you go. Now, some of the options I'm going to show you in terms of each record on the list. As you can see here, each client each record has a little blue ball at the front. That's synonymous in client track or in terms of PAHMIS, meaning that it's going to be a menu, and it's going to show a bunch of different actions that you can take on that specific record. Because this is pretty much a summary record, so there, you can't make any changes or any information there. But you need to use the options here to take action upon the record itself. We'll get to some of those questions in just a little bit. The first option, and what I'm going to do is quickly go through these options just to give you guys a base knowledge of what these options do. The first option is Review Prioritization List. And this is very similar to the placement screen. You get to actually, when you click on it, it basically is going to load that record itself. And it should look fairly familiar for those that saw the training yesterday. It's going to include the name, any household members, referral services, available counties. There's also the status itself, which we'll talk about, which is very important for updating the prioritization list. Then there's also the assigned assessment staff as well as client information. The other information that it does show is that down at the bottom is it shows a referral service grid. And as you can see, it basically shows each service need that the client has. So they have diversion and rental assistance. So diversion and rental assistance are shown down here. And it kind of gives you feedback to see if any imports or referrals or anything have been done for those services. So now as we can see that those are blank, that means, as of right now, nothing's been done specifically for those services themselves. Then there's also referrals and service acceptance, which we'll get into when we talk about, updating the record itself. The other things that are good on this prioritization list are coordinated screening assessments, as well as referrals. These are located directly in the list record. So if you want to take a look at their latest screening, you can do that. You can actually load it right on the screen. Take a look at it if you want to review it, or even just see the score breakdowns that's available to you, any referrals that might have been sent for the client, as well as we've got the coordinated intake notes that are available here. And the coordinated intake notes are a very important part of the process because they're on, for those that were here yesterday, they're on both sides of the process, both on the intake assessment as well as on the prioritization list. And all notes entered for a client are seen by basically all parties that have access to the list and the assessments. Okay, the next option, and now you're going to do within the review, that's where a lot of the action takes place, and we'll talk about that in a little bit once I continue down through some of these functions. Coordinated intake notes, this is where they are kept, and this will display all the intake notes that have been recorded for this specific client. You can view an individual note, and it'll actually tell you whether it's from the community list, meaning it came from the prioritization list, or whether it was an intake assessment, whether it came from the intake side, to help differentiate where it came from, as well as the organization. And you can also, of course, enter in a new community list note, and that's something important to do anytime you work with a client, talk to a client, especially when you're going to be updating statuses or anything like that. And it allows for drop-downs within the list note to help you categorize the notes themselves. Let's say we want to enter in a note for this client. You can either have general information and communications, which changes the drop-down list for contact type to give you either general information, agency-to-agency communication, or community list status change. So if you happen to change their status, that's a good header to put. There is also, if it's not a general information or more like agency-to-agency communications or just general updates, if it is a direct client contact, we actually ask what the contact was. Did you speak to the client? Was it an email? Was it a phone call? To try to track on how you talked to the client themselves. So you can use these to help categorize the notes better when you're looking at them or anybody else is looking at them in the future. And I just wanted to show you the process of entering in a note. And as you can see, it'll show back up on the list, and everybody now will have access to view that information. Because basically anybody that's in the Western Continuum Coordinated Entry Group, whether you're an assessment center, a default assessment center, or you're just a referral partner, a no wrong door kind of place, you all will have access to this prioritization list and the records and information on them. So we also have document upload and sharing. And this is, again, for those that were here yesterday, kind of the same feature that we showed from the intake assessment. This allows you to upload documentation into the system, like literally upload it for electronic storage. And it gives you some categories for identification, eligibility determination, general information. Now on the intake side, they may enter information about, homelessness documentation or, you know, the beginnings of eligibility to help later on in the process so that that information can be shared with any provider that may pick up the process on this end. But this is also where you enter in any eligibility, determination, information, and attach it to the record in the system. And we use a choose file option. So basically you can click on it and you go in and it gives you the search screen where you can attach a specific document. Now you can create a single upload for every document, or I know a lot of people, hopefully those are familiar with the zip files. It does allow zip files to be uploaded. So if you have like eligibility documentation, instead of creating 5 individual records themselves, you could just zip up those 5 records and put them into a single upload. And it could be eligibility documentation, 5 forms for eligibility uploaded, and maybe what they are, homelessness, income, that sort of thing. Now, by default, this information and this upload can be viewed and used. They'll also be able to download the document and use it by default. However, if, and this is mostly born from the DV providers that work in our system, we have an option to do not share this document. So if you check that box, you can still use this feature. We didn't want to prevent people from using the feature because it's kind of nice. It keeps documentation there, right there within the system, that if you do check that box, it will not be shared across the continuum. It will only stay within your organization. So whoever uploaded it, that organization will only be the one that can see it. So we gave that option. It's basically a sharing, you know, share, don't share for the system. I apologize, the system is taking its time. Probably should have saved a smaller document. And this is the training site, so the training site has a lot less resources than our production site in terms of, you know, server speed. So the production site is usually much more efficient. All right, I'm going to hide that, and hopefully that will save in due time. It might have already saved now. Let's go and see. No, it went to cyberspace. Okay. That's a shame. Okay. So, but, you know, if that would have saved, it should have been here, and it should have been available to everybody for uploading. I'm going to do another one real quick without a document tied to it. Make sure it saves. There we go. Okay. And there it is. And it's got document name and the category. And just like the intake notes, you can edit, view, and that's where you go into it. And you can click on the actual icon to download the document itself. The other option we want to talk about is the intake notes log. This is actually a lot like the intake notes, but it's more in a log form. With the intake notes, we've got 1 note per record. So what we've done to kind of help put this all, you know, the information together, we've created this intake note log, which will basically just give you a printout of all the intake notes for the client. And it starts at the latest note, and it goes down, and can help you, quickly parse, keywords or information. We include, the status of the body can be used, printed out, looked at, just a nice, easy way to take a look at all of their history to see if someone's working on them or not. So that is a new feature that will be out soon. And just to let you know, we are doing the release for these features tonight. So tomorrow morning in the production system is when you're going to see all the updates and features from yesterday's and today's training. So it will be out there. Okay. So those are the basic functions that you can use within the system. Now we can kind of talk about process a little bit in regards to viewing clients, relating to the status as well as days in status. Those are actually, we've made some changes to those to hopefully make the process a little more streamlined, more timetabled, if you will. Because the idea of it is you come to the list, providers come to the list, and you search for client matches that you may be able to provide services for. And that's why one of the big parts of the search are looking for service needs as well as the counties. And that's kind of why we expanded the counties to have multiple counties, because a client could want to be served or could be relocated into multiple counties. We want to make sure that they can be searched on by providers within those counties themselves. So in the example here, if we say I was a rapid rehousing provider in Crawford County, you could go to the list and look for clients that meet that geographic location as well as service needs. And it actually, as it comes up, it is actually 3. Now, again, training list, production list is going to be a little bit longer. I think before we go on, I think I've got a fair amount of questions. Let's go ahead, before we move into some of the processes here, let's see if we can stop and answer some of these questions. The first question is, could you talk more about how we are going to collect a list of counties from clients?
So yes, can we go back to the consumer prioritization record?
Yeah, absolutely.
So prior to placing a consumer on the housing prioritization list, the assessment staff will have that consumer either on the phone or in their office, and they will be asking them pretty much, since consumer choice is paramount to our process, we want to make sure that they have knowledge of all the services that could be provided to them, as well as that they understand that these are, the available counties within our system where they could potentially receive services from. So we more or less, right here, when you get to this option, you'll want to hear from the consumer or the client and ask them, which counties they would be willing to relocate to. And only the counties that the client selects would then populate over to transfer over to the housing prioritization list. So then that is when Brian was showing us how to search, use that search function for the different counties. It'll actually, yes, like Brian said, streamline the process a bit for each county. You know, if they have county funding and or that can only specifically serve county residency or whatever, you know, they can go search the list, pull up their county and see which clients pull on the list, and obviously they're being prioritized with the highest need or the severity of service. So.
Another question. How long after no contact can someone on the list be moved to missing?
The CE, the Coordinated Entry Committee, we're playing around with that right now, but I believe I heard 90 days currently. So after 90 days that we're not able to locate that client, we'll want to move them to missing, and that's when we more or less would want to assign a street outreach staff or get someone, you know, checking and trying to relocate the missing consumer to engage them back with the process.
Gotcha. Do you think that's something that's going to be, like, should, like, providers do that, or is that going to be like a process, like, you know, every month we'll go ahead and sweep the missing, or how do you see that playing out?
It's going to be a shared responsibility between the assessment staff and the service provider.
Gotcha. So they're allowed to, if they see someone that's over 90 days, they know they haven't been contacted, they can move it to missing themselves, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I know that there's some street outreach funding that's out there, so maybe that's something that you know, would eventually play a role into helping to manage this list as well.
Who is responsible for collecting, I know this might be getting a little ahead of things, who is responsible for collecting all the necessary documentation needed to show homelessness?
Again, it would be a shared responsibility. So if that consumer presented at an assessment center and they had the documents with them, then we would expect for the assessment staff to upload that documentation into the system to help speed up the enrollment process. But if that information is not in the system, you know, it would be more or less for the service provider to obtain.
Got it. Someone asked, and I'm not sure, does this have the capabilities to cross counties for Eastern and Western RABs? We do have, this is just for the Western COC, so we have the, what is it, the Northeast and the Southwest RABs are in there, but no, it doesn't cross over to the Eastern COC. I guess I don't know if that's a question for like a county, like a border county. So if they're like on, gosh, Armstrong or something, or Westmoreland, and they also want to be across county, how would they handle that?
Mm-hmm.
Like they couldn't pick Franklin.
Right. So more information to come on cross-county referrals and how the coordinated entry system will play into that. More information to come out soon on that.
Well, thanks. Good question, and this is actually going into where we're heading into the process. Let's say theoretically at intake, I place someone on prioritization, and they may only want to choose in their home county. As a provider, do I reach out to the #1 person on the list, like totally, or do I search for consumers only wanting to live in my county that's on #1 on the list? You know what I mean?
Chronic, you would have to search top of the list. So for your chronic chronic programs, yes, you would have to search from the top of the list. Non-chronic, I believe you're able to search by county, and then top of the list.
Perfect. Oh, I got you. Okay. Okay, and this might, I think, a good question. So to clarify, the person could potentially score high on the assessment via a call-in center or assessment center and be at the top of the list with no supporting documentation to prove homelessness status. At that point, the agency who accepts the referral is responsible for gathering the documentation?
That's correct. And if they're in the, if they don't meet the like the screening portion of it, then you would move on to the next person on the list.
Got it.
But all this but all of this information and all of the attempts that the assessment staff or the service provider are making should be documented in coordinated intake notes. There has to be a pattern, you know, that we are making efforts to reach out to the clients who are placed on the top of the list to service them.
Gotcha. Another question about documentation. And this is from like the intake side. Should we be uploading a letter from the shelter or proof of homelessness when they come in for initial coordinated entry intake?
Say that again?
Should we be uploading like the documentation, letter from a shelter or proof of homelessness when they come in for the initial coordinated entry intake?
If you have it, if that consumer presents, you know, we're supposed to be housing these clients as quickly as possible with low barriers to entry. So, I mean, if the assessment staff have it and they're able to upload the information, great. If not, you know, at that point in time, we really just want to get them on the list so that they can be prioritized for services.
Got it. So on the front side, it's like, great if you can get it, but not required. On the back side, it is required, right?
Again, I think it's going to be a shared responsibility. How many times does that is that consumer closest to the assessment center? Does it make sense? You know, make sense for them to bring the information in? And I think it's just going to be communication amongst both parties. Who makes sense to obtain the documentation? Just shared responsibility.
Gotcha. And these are still good questions coming in because it's all about what we're kind of talking about now, which is the matching process. Okay. How long after reaching out to a person on the list without a return call do the provider have to wait before contacting the next person on the list to fill a bed?
What did we say?
Is that the 7-day thing that we're going to go over?
I believe so. All activity, yes. The days and status, yes. 7 days. So currently every status, every attempt of engagement, I believe we're saying 7 days.
Gotcha.
Now again, that's where we're starting at. That may change depending on the need. And the committee does realize that that's going to need to change, but we needed a starting point. So we said 7 days.
Gotcha. And I'm going to show you guys that once we get through the questions. That's exactly what we're going to go into. It's about the status, the days on status, and basically the 7-day loop process that they're beginning with. Let's see. Like someone's asking, are intake notes going to be enough for supporting documentation if the client can't provide documentation?
Is this coming from the assessment center side or the service provider side? Assessment center, yeah. It's just if they have it, great. Let's collect it. Let's upload it. I mean, on that side, knowing what's going to be needed to help speed up the process, you know, and encouraging the client, you know, that client to have the information if at all possible. But again, we wouldn't want to hold the process up from that client being placed on the prioritization list for services.
Gotcha. But on the back side, the intake notes aren't enough. You need actual documentation just like you would any other enrollment, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think that is it for now. There's a couple others that we can get to at the end. We'll address at the end. They're more total process based. Well, thank you. Okay. So those are good. Keep the questions coming in. We are going to, now that we kind of know how to navigate and kind of search on the list, hopefully my internet will get going, the system will get going. We know how to filter and look for clients near us, as well as populations. Now, let's say we need to start then digging in and start taking a look at these clients to see if you can provide beds or, you know, housing services for these clients. The big point is the coordinated intake notes. That's one thing that Javon mentioned. You always, you know, anytime you make contact or attempt to make contact, you definitely want to record it in the intake notes. It's definitely something that you want to get used to doing because that's where, you know, everyone should kind of look off, and that's why we created the intake note log. So you can run it, take a look at the top couple of notes to see if someone's working on them or not. But that's something you want to get in the habit of to make sure not only yourself, you know, what you're, you know, been working on with a client, but others know as well. Now, the status. This kind of controls, you know, the status of the client, like where they are in the process. And there are a number of statuses, and we're going to kind of talk about them. And anytime someone's put on the list, brand new, of course they are assigned a new status. However, there are a number of intermediary statuses that can be placed while they're being reviewed or looked at. And then there, of course, there are other statuses like the missing that can be used when you are closing out or placing the client. We are going to talk about the intermediary ones, which are actually called in processing and under review. And to do that, let's say you look at a client and the client is top on the list. You've kind of looked over his information. You want to make a match. You reach out to them. You put them in, put in the intake notes. What you want to do is, here's the status right here, and here is all the list of all the statuses. The two that we're going to talk about right now are new, in processing, and reviewed. Those are the three statuses that make up the records that are on the active list. These other ones we'll talk about, like missing, that's the one that you set for the missing. And then the other three, placed, closed, and turned away, are the historical ones, meaning they're no longer active. But in processing and reviews, what we want to talk about, and when you make contact with a client and you are processing them, basically attempting to collect all the eligibility and documentation from them to determine whether or not you have space and they meet your program's requirement to actually give them services. You want to switch it to in processing. That's it. Pretty much that's what you need to do. And of course, if you try to save, the system will bark at you to make sure that you enter in a note. Anytime the status is changed, you need to make sure there's a note in the system for why you changed the status. So we're going to go ahead, and that's one of the reasons. And hopefully you already have a note in there, direct contact that maybe happened the day before that said, I phoned the client, reached out to the client for appointments to collect the documentation. Okay. Now that should, technically should have been there. So now the client's reached back to us, and we have the appointment made, and we are going to do the processing of the eligibility. So we are going to note, instead of direct contact, we're going to go general information and contact list status change. Change to in processing, meeting clients, type, Okay, so now that's in there. And then what you can do is easily, that's also why you can just close that. That's also why we put the coordinated notes right there on the screen, so you don't have to cancel out of the record or anything. Once that's done, you can go ahead and hit save. And as you can see now, the client will be in processing. And days in current status, we record in the system the day that you change the status to in processing. And it basically, every time you load the screen, it will count forward. And it basically gives you 7 days to determine whether the client, meets eligibility and you're going to serve them, or whether they need to go back in the queue.
Correct. Yeah. Once those 7 days expires, the status should change back to reviewed, which would then make that consumer available to be serviced by other providers.
Now, the 7 days, what we've done is any status that's 6 days and under is going to be white, kind of the black box, nothing special about it. Any status, no matter what it is, new, reviewed, in processing, anyone that is over that 7-day time frame, we're going to highlight in red. It's kind of like a, hey, this status has been here too long, probably someone needs to look at this. Once you get past that 7-day time frame, those records will start lighting up as red, as a quick warning when you're searching through the list that the red ones are important to look at. Now, as Javon said, during the process, if you happen to come in and realize that, hey, this client, doesn't meet eligibility, or, you're not going to find a spot, you can't serve him for whatever reason, you do want to go back and set it to reviewed, and then hit save. Of course, you want to enter in a new note. And you go ahead and hit save. And now the reviewed will start the count again as it goes forward, so that once it hits 7 days, it'll start blinking, shown as red as well. And then someone hopefully can come along and go, oh, well, that one hasn't been reviewed. Let me take a look. And then you repeat the process where, hey, if you're working with them, you can set them back to in processing.
Right.
And then work with them, hopefully, until they're finally accepted, and, you can provide them services. Do I have that correct?
Yes, if they need a little bit more time to obtain, yes, that's correct, obtain information, or they're still working on the enrollment, then yes, they would want to, after 7 days, switch it back to reviewed and then into in process if they're still working with the client.
Gotcha. Now, once it goes to reviewed here, and let's say the client, for some reason the provider and the client just never match up, it's just the eligibility isn't there, do they then walk away from the record and then go to the next record, and then can another provider come behind them and pick up a reviewed record?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
I would always, best practices, though, is reach out to that, and that's why we're using coordinated intake notes. Like there should be a note in there, why movement was ceased, or, is that what happened with that client. You can also, there is a list out there of assessment centers if you need to reach out to the point of contact to get information on that client. Like I noticed that Greene County was serving this consumer last week, but there hasn't really been any movement, and we have funds that could house this client, maybe just, it's going to take some talking, some communication to work through this list, not only with the consumer, but all of the providers as well. So still using email that may arise, but then also these notes.
Gotcha. So can we say when a record is in processing, other providers should probably skip it for the time being? Or can they still look at...
For the time being, yes.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, okay. Okay. Got it. Now, so that's kind of how, for now, we're going with, you know, the 7-day.
And I'd say as long, oh, sorry, can I interject one more time?
No,
and I'd say as long as it's within that 7 day, like if they're still within their 7 days, then I'd say yes. If, like I see right here, John Miller's at 28.
Got it.
You know, I would question, you know, is this client being serviced? I would just do some investigation. So following up with the last service provider who was reaching out to the consumers. That's what I would suggest.
Gotcha. Great. Okay. Now that we kind of know, hopefully, you know, how to use the reviewed and in processing to keep people aware of how you're working with the clients that you're working with, I'm going to show you the process of a successful accepting them, basically. Like you matched up, you know, you got all the eligibility documentation and you want to serve this client. We're going to go ahead and use John Miller. And I'm going to go to review. As you see, he's been processing for 28 days. Hopefully he would be back and reviewed, but we've done, you know, the coordinated entry notes. I'm not going to go through, with the system being a little slow, go through that process. But the option is, basically what you're going to do is you leave it as in processing for now, and you're going to go down and you're going to use this service acceptance button. This is basically the option that says, hey, I'm going to serve this client. The client and family is going to actually be pulled into your agency, and is going to be available to do full enrollments and regular data collection, like for those familiar with, you know, the regular HMIS data collection and functionality. So you definitely want to use the service accept button once you've determined that, hey, they're going to go in my program. So you click that option. And just as a note, you don't want to do that while you're still vetting them or anything. This is kind of like I'm absolutely positive I'm going to serve them. It asks you for which one of the, you know, if the client has multiple services, which service you are going to provide them, and provided should be the default set.
And Brian, those two options, the referral services, those are based off of the referral services needs that were selected with the consumer and the assessment staff when the consumer's record was created. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay, so if a service is not pulling up that service provider is needing, then they would have to go back to the prioritization record and update it. Is that correct?
Yep. Let's go ahead. I'm just going to cancel out of this. Yep, absolutely. So we're going to go back and where was John Miller? And we're going to go back here. And absolutely, it's actually pulled off the services. So if we, you know, it's actually permanent, and any of this information can be changed because, you know, things change. Maybe the customer's like, oh, I can also stay in Jefferson. You know, so these can be changed during its process.
But any changes would force a coordinated intake note, so it's noted in the system. Is that correct? So any changes that you make to the record, we would have to add a coordinated intake note? Yes. Is that how that would work? Okay.
and then down here, once you save it, it'll refresh, and then you'll have the new option down here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Service Accept. Service Accept also saves the screen itself, so you don't have to go save and then come back out. And then that's how we'll have permanent supportive housing. So if you are missing a service, that's just like Javon said, how to do that. And I know a lot of the records are defaulting to all the services now, so hopefully that should help as well. Once you select which service you're going to do, you basically hit Accept from List. And this is a process of basically recording. You're basically sending a referral to yourself saying, hey, I'm going to serve this client for rapid rehousing or whatever service that you selected, and it performs the import into your agency of the client, as well as if, you know, any household member that may be with it. So that's the step of closing out the service itself. Now, at this point in time, the prioritization list record is still set to in processing. So there's one of two ways to permanently close out that record. The easiest way, I think, is, and that's why we kind of refresh it down here. You can actually load the client dashboard, which basically loads the client in the client tab. You can start an enrollment, which is just an HMIS enrollment, or you can return the list. And the reason we do that is if you were to do an enrollment for this client into your rapid rehousing program, once the enrollment was done, the system is smart enough to automatically close that record off the list for you. They'll be moved from the active to the historical list, and everything will be recorded properly. So that's one way to get them closed off the list. And probably the recommended way. You want to go ahead, you're going to have to probably enroll them in the HMIS anyway. Might as well try to do that in one step there. And you don't have to do it on that step. You know, once they're imported, you can actually go to the client tab and do your regular find add client and go ahead and enroll them. For those that are familiar with the standard HMIS programs process in the system. Now, there is a manual way to do it, which you can also do, and that's for, you know, other situations where maybe the program's not in the system, a DV program, that sort of thing, where you can change the status manually. And that's where we talk about we actually have these four historical statuses. We have placed, closed, turned away, and missing. The missing we kind of talked about as being the, you know, they're on the list, they kind of disappeared, you know, don't know where they are. We don't want to completely close them out. We're going to send them missing and then, you know, try to assign outreach to go see if they can find them. Placed, closed, and turned away are a little bit more final, if you will, as they get actually placed on the historical list. And the placed version is kind of our positive outcome, meaning, hey, you know, our client had a housing need and we positively, you know, provided them the service that they were looking for. And they were enrolled or provided the service that they needed. So you can actually select placed, and then what it does is it actually asks for a placement destination. And you basically enter it based on what type of program they went into. And again, if you were to do the enrollment, the system would be smart enough to fill this all out for you based on the service and the program that you're working on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit placed in rapid rehousing since that's the service we had. Now, if we go down at the bottom, we can see rapid rehousing. We've got our permanent now down here. But this actually shows us the good stuff here, where it shows, hey, it's not blank anymore. This service accept showed us, hey, a referral is accepted, service was provided. So it does give some feedback that that service is being taken care of for this client. Now, if you do the full enrollment, it'll actually attach the program itself in the system as well, and it will be listed here, again, for reference purposes and hopefully future reporting. So it's kind of another good reason to try to do the enrollments to get them off the list. But other than that, placed and the destination, that's all you need to do. And of course, we have to add a intake note. You'll get used to these prompts. Hopefully, you'll be proactive with it. Save. So now we have the note, and now we're going to go ahead and hit save. And now if we go and look, and I'm actually going to search, I believe his name was John, Miller. And as we can see on the active list, there is no John Miller. However, when a person gets placed, which is closed out, they actually get moved to the historical list. So we don't delete them or anything like that. Their information is still available. We're going to go ahead to go historical. And then as we can see, this is where John Miller, who we just closed out, is, and he's at placed. So that information can always be found. You know, you can see times when you, oh, I accidentally placed that guy. He should have been still open. So we do allow mistakes in data entry to be, you know, undone by just going back into the notes and changing the correct status. But that's where the client goes and is no longer part of the active list. So when
Brian,
the provider comes,
oh, sorry. Same with the screening score as well. So we noticed that the client may have been a bit low on the housing prioritization list, so we want to go in and update the coordinated assessment. We're able to. Can we show them how to do that too after?
Sure. Yeah. Yep. I will. Now, just to finish up with the status stuff, because there are two statuses left for closed out and turned away that we want to show you, and then I'll show you how to get to in the coordinated screening tool from this area to edit it. Let's say we are working with a client here, and for specific reasons, they were not placed. This is basically, we've got the closed out and the turned away. These are kind of, we don't want to call them negative results, but they're non-positive results. You know, the placed is basically, hey, we definitely, we provided the service they needed. Now, closed and turned away, there isn't really a distinction between the two. They basically mean the same thing. I think closed is used more often than not. And closed basically means the client, you know, is on the list, but for whatever reason, you know, you've been in contact with them, but maybe they don't meet the homelessness requirements anymore. They got put on the list accidentally. They found housing on their own. They went through a different resource. Basically, they no longer need or want services from the prioritization list. So you can move them off the active list. by selecting closed or turned away, mean the same thing in terms of what we're using it for reporting. And then it's going to ask for a non-placement reason. And this basically asks, and these are kind of general categories: did not meet homelessness, housing requirement needs. Maybe once we dug into some of their eligibility, we realized they weren't actually homeless or literally homeless. They declined further assistance. We have deceased, and then there's unknown, disappeared. Excuse me. Now, the unknown and disappeared is probably going to be replaced with the missing list for now. But that is a category, maybe eventually moving a missing person off to the closed list. And then there's other, and that's just a preliminary list. We can always add additional options down the road. But when we do select closed, we're going to go ahead and hit save. That is going to permanently move them off the list as well. So they are going to get moved over to the historical. And I believe, what was that, ZZ? Can't remember who. There it was. There it is. Okay. Closed 0. That was easy. So now they're on the closed list, and basically nobody is going to be looking at them at the active list. So just want to make sure that the closed list does, it's for the entire record. So it's not for like a service-based. So let's say you're reviewing the active list and you come across the client and, he has got a couple services, and you realize, well, I'm going to review them and in processing, and I find that for whatever reason the client doesn't meet eligibility for my program, I can't serve them. That's where you just want to update the notes, set them back to review and say, hey, I can't provide services from for this client, but you don't want to close them out off the list because that is for everybody. Just want to make sure the distinction between serving people with a specific service and the status, which is for the general record overall. So you only want to do that when, none of the services can be provided, or one of the other reasons that we kind of showed you earlier. So those are the two ways to kind of finalize a record, place them positively, for the service that they provide. Definitely want to make sure you use that service acceptance button. Now, as for the screening tool, that is also within the edit record. The edit and the coordinated notes are probably going to be your best friends within this area. Because here is where, up at the top, you can always go in to edit the record, and it's always going to show you, if you click on this option, it's going to show you all the coordinated screening tools collected for that client. Now, the system's smart enough to automatically associate the latest one. So say a client has 2, maybe they did one a year ago, came back, now they're a year later. The one attached to the wait list and the one that's used for the prioritization is the latest one. But we do show all of the screenings here if they happen to have more than one. And it opens up and it's got the summary view, and everybody that has access to these records, you can actually go in and review screening tool. And for those that were on the training yesterday, how we showed there it goes. We kind of thoroughly went through that coordinated screening tool from the assessment side. This is the same exact thing. It's got all the tabs here. It is shown as one full page. That's kind of the way it's like the edit version of it. But you are allowed to go in and you can click on each of the pages up here, and it'll jump you to that section so that you can review that information. You can actually change it. You know, like Javon said, you know, that guy's scoring looks too low or too high. Let me go in and investigate and take a look at their scoring, and you can make updates to their actual scoring to make sure that it is correct. Then you basically just hit finish. That's right, I need to hide that place on prioritization list. Since you're already on the list, you definitely don't need to place them again. So any changes that you make to it, you just want to hit finish again, and the score will automatically update. Well, let's see, it's on 181 now. Let me do a scoring change.
Select unable to work.
There we go. There we go. Okay, that did it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I already had that 5 there. Oh, I did. I was checking these. These don't give points. Okay. There we go. Wrong check boxes. Sorry, guys. Okay, there we go. Now we got the 10 extra points there. Now the score is 196. So, you know, we go, okay, that's the better score for it. So if we come back down, now we're on Will Solomon. If we cancel out and reload the list, we can now see there he is, 196. So it will update in real time and allow you to make changes directly within all the records. And that's any of the records there, DV or not DV. I think, I don't know if there's anything else to add in terms of how the processes work. One thing, the reporting, we do have a summary and details report down here. Details, it's really good. This kind of shows detail, you know, it's kind of a way to print out the list with filters, if you will. So you can select, you know, the current month. It allows you to go through filter statuses. So if you want to say, hey, I want to look at everyone that's reviewed, days in status, so anybody that's over 7 days. And then you can say, you know, anybody that's in Butler or these whatever counties and these services. And then run the report. And it basically allows you to really filter the report, much like you search on the actual list, and it will actually produce a nice report for you that's it's grouped by county. And if there's multiple counties, it'll put them there, you know, so it'll group the clients by the counties that they have selected for location or relocation. And it shows, so there's only one client that met, you know, rapid rehousing, permanent housing in those counties that was reviewed over 7 days. So you can use that report because I know some people like to print out things and look at reports a little better than staring at screens. So this can definitely be used to be helpful when viewing information on the community queue.
And it'll be helpful to manage the list.
Yes, yes. The other thing I wanted to show you, and this kind of goes to, I guess, kind of referrals. We also have a new feature that's coming out that will be available.
Brian, before you talk about referrals, I wanted to talk about turned away status a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, because I know that, and I just wanted to make note that just to be mindful and watchful, because no more than 3 refusals are permitted per program. And if a agency goes over those 3 refusals, then it would be sent to the coordinated entry committee. So I did just want to bring that to everyone's attention, to watch how you're utilizing the turned away status. So that's all.
Gotcha. Okay. With the referrals, and these are more kind of alert referrals, because as you can see, I mean, this is just a small, the training site. The production site has a lot more clients, a lot harder to filter and stay on top of things. So what we've actually done is we've created the ability to send out batch email notifications for when new people are placed on the priority list, the prioritization list. And we can configure it to basically everybody's needs, because people that serve rapid rehousing in Butler don't want to get a notification email for someone in Cameron for shelter, So what we've actually done is, and we're actually going to go to the Home tab, because everyone within their coordinated entry work group has this community assessment reports, and these are actually, there's coordinated entry summary, prioritization list summary. These are kind of more higher level, give bulk data, X amount served, X amount assessed. But we do have demographics details as well as the prioritization list details there. So those are good reports, and anybody has access to them. The information is good. You can go in there and play with these. But we have this prioritization list placement batch notice. And basically, and this is something that I can, probably myself will be setting up hopefully sooner than later. I believe it's, the county contacts we want to start with that have the ability to basically receive a batch email about placements onto the list within a couple time frames. So you can choose, placements that occurred today, the placements that occurred the last 3 days, or the placements that occurred during the last 7 days. And you can actually filter by specific counties and by specific services. Now what that does, as you can see, it's quite similar to the details report, but what's cool about this report is we've got a schedule report button down here. So we can actually schedule it, and we can go in here and actually name a schedule. And you can pick when it's going to run. So you can run it every day, starting at, let's say, 11 a.m. You can run it once a week, once a month. You could even schedule it twice, so it runs twice a day. I'm just kind of giving you guys the flexibility of what we can do, so you can start thinking about, hey, how do I want to receive these batch email updates? Because I'll probably, be the one setting these up, because we can actually go in here, referral recipient, and basically anybody, if you have a user account within the system, we can attach these alerts for you. Now, I kind of have this screen up. This is what they look like. I set up a prioritization list placement, kind of like these are our referrals, you know, when clients get put on a list. Instead of getting like real-time emails every single, you know, time a single person gets placed, the idea of kind of like a batch, you know, daily, and you can control when you get it. You know, I want it at noon, I want it at 5, I want it at 5 and, you know, 9 a.m. What you'll get is an actual email telling you, hey, your report is ready, and the email comes and it'll actually give you a link that basically will give you the ability to load the batch report. And it'll basically come up, and I ran it. I'm running mine just to, you know, I was giving it a test. I was running it just for daily. I only want to see the ones that were placed today. And I'm running it at the end of the day. So basically in the morning, I'm getting yesterday's placements. And it's showing, as you can see, today's the 30th. So it's got the 3 people, 29, 29, 29. And these are all the people that we did in our training yesterday. And it shows those that were placed. Now, I didn't put any filtering on it. I just wanted it wide open. But it can be filtered by county, by service, to allow you to get these batch updates, to basically give you an alert and say, hey, we got a client that just got put on the list. You may want to go in the system and take a look to help out, to help better manage, you know, the list and the clients on it. So just wanted to mention that.
You know, Brian, can I take that back to the committee, because I'm pretty sure the way that it sounded like they would like for like the referral to be reviewed daily. So I don't know, and I feel like that should be conducted universally across the continuum. So I don't know if that should be like an option, just to, you know, for anyone to choose of their liking. I'm not sure. So do you mind if I take that back to the committee? Okay.
No, yeah, I was just introducing the functionality.
That's a nice feature.
You guys let me know how you want to use it,
okay.
if you like it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So once hopefully we get some rules and everything on that, we can start getting people set up, you know, with some alerts coming through, so that, you know, you at least got a good starting place when going to the list for taking a look at all the clients that are there. I believe that is it, and I think we're about 5 minutes over. Let's go to the chat to see what questions we have. I think I've been gabbing for a while. There might be some new questions. Is there a manual that explains the definitions of items within the assessment, within the lists, processes? Yes. We actually have, I mean, from an HMIS standpoint, we actually have a Western Continuum, you know, CES guide. I think we released it about a month or 2 ago. I am still in the process of making updates to it. I'm almost done with these round of updates. So I'm hoping to get the new guide that has basically all the things you see in HMIS, you know, kind of basic rules and features and everything like that, as well as any updates we've made to the coordinated screening tool. Kind of providing like a paper template so at least people know what to ask. I'm working on that as well. So hopefully I can get that to Javon, I'm hoping very soon, Monday, Tuesday. so it can be dispersed to everybody.
Yeah, there's also definitions in the current policy and procedures manual that touches on all of the statuses and the coordinated entry functions.
Gotcha. Wow. Turned away. Okay, you talked about turned away. As a shelter service provider, should we wait till the client shows up at the facility to select the service acceptance button?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, as a emergency shelter provider, should we wait until the client shows up at the facility to select the service acceptance button?
Is emergency shelter an option, Brian, for service accepting?
Yeah, we do.
Yes. Okay. Then yes.
Yeah. Yes, okay. Yeah, because unfortunately there's no real way to undo service acceptance. I mean, if that becomes a problem, I'm sure we can figure out a way to undo it. So
now that wouldn't remove them off the list though, correct? Because if they're just an emergency shelter, they would have to stay on the prioritization list because they're still technically homeless.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point too. In enrollment, yeah, we talked about in enrollment, taking them off the list. That's only into a permanent housing program. So it's got to be like, you know, DSH, a permanent housing derivative, or rapid rehousing. So if you just enroll them in a transitional or shelter, they remain on the list. And yes, you're right, that service acceptance would only close out or show that that specific service is being handled. I think the turned away, someone like 3 refusals for the same client or 3 total for the agency?
Let me see. Per program.
Per program, okay. Here's kind of a process. We have clients that don't know what housing options are available in the county. How will clients be made aware of what the options are, or what housing option will best fit them? Or will the person doing the assessment choose an option for them?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. We have clients that don't know what housing options are available in the county. How will clients be made aware of what options will best fit them? Or will the person doing the assessment choose for them based on their situation?
I'm
assuming they're talking about like they need
the referral
shelter,
service needs, the housing interventions that are I would I guess it should say like the assessment staff, yes, it would be ideal for them to know what services are available for that consumer using the referral services needs. So maybe going down that list with the consumer and explaining each housing intervention to them. And they could then choose which housing intervention is best for them. And they're able, and another thing to note is that they would be able to update their list at any time in this process. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's, okay. Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. There's some questions here about the initial search, about having, two options to search and create. Just want to, if the person's still on, we're actually doing a release today that actually we hope fixes that problem. Because before we had the pre-screening that kind of did a search, and then you went into the next step, which was the client intake, which was another search. So we've kind of changed that around, so you just have to do the search at the beginning. We're hoping that will address the double search thing at the beginning. Here's why was the utilization deadline changed to 12/11? There are a lot of unanswered questions by the CE committee. I feel a general Q&A would be helpful prior to the deadline. Any news?
The deadline that was set by HUD and not by the COC executive board. The deadline that was set by the board, the COC, was the December 11th deadline. One, because we want to give users the chance to actually get onto the system and begin to use it the way that it's meant to be used and work out all of the kinks. We don't want we feel it's advantageous for us to get on the system, work it how it's supposed to be worked, fix any kinks now, and be ready and up and set to go for the January 23rd deadline. We don't want to be making changes on January 23rd.
Cool. Thanks. A question about, it looks like the 7-day rollover. When working with a client, do we need to should we make notes on a weekly basis, like every 7 days? Should we record notes on contacts with the client or attempts at contact, even if no contact is made, I guess is the question.
Even if no contact's made?
Yeah.
No contact.
But they try to contact them, but they can't. Should they?
Oh, like there was a failed attempt. Yes, absolutely. Some required activities to be documented under coordinated intake notes could include, but definitely not be limited to, again, when you obtain the eligibility documentation, attempts made to reach the consumer, maybe attempts at locating a unit, any placement or closure activities that have occurred. If you've sent manual referrals or the automated referrals to participating agencies. If the consumer refuses a program that was offered, that would be something good to notate. Any updates all updates that are made to that consumer's assessment screening score. And prioritization list records. So those are some examples of what should be notated under coordinated intake notes.
Cool. And technically, let's say someone, got set in the reviewed state, and then, weeks go by, they could technically stay in that reviewed state for a long period of time, right? Until someone connects with them, right?
Yeah, yes.
Got it. Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
But we want to,
yeah.
but we want to show that that record is being reviewed every 7 days. You know, that client's just not sitting on the list stagnant, that something's happening with. So that's why we want to make sure that we document all attempts to engage that consumer. Mm-hmm.
But we just don't want to review status with 50 days. We want to review status with 50 days that should have some kind of intake notes every 7 to 10 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay. I believe that's it. Well, actually, there is one other question. One of the people, one of them says one of the providers, I believe they have organizations in both COCs, the Eastern and the Western COC. Unfortunately, the two COCs kind of operate separately. There's actually a division line. We have a Western COC process, or Western Coordinated Entry process. We also have an Eastern Continuum Coordinated process. Right now, it's just finished the pilot stage in the Lehigh Valley, Northampton area. It's about ready to expand to the other RABs of the COC. So in that situation, you're probably going to have to be in both of those, both of those coordinated entry systems, depending on, your programs. Your East programs will look on the west side, your East programs will look on the east side, your West programs will look on the west side, at least for now. So if you do have them on the east side, you can go ahead and reach out to either myself or David Weddington. He's involved with the Eastern COC coordinated entry process for information on that.